There's a pretty heavy-hitting article that came out talking about Blizzard and some insider type of information about what happened within the company, so let's explain it all. Okay, so let's explain what's going on. Inside Activision and Blizzard's corporate Warcraft. This is basically a article that is written by Jason Schreier. Schreier? Gonna mispronounce that last name. Which is the same gentleman that wrote this book, The Rise, Fall, and Future of Blizzard Entertainment. And this is a book that comes out on October 8th. Funny enough, the same day the Diablo 4 expansion releases. Now, if you're thinking this sounds like maybe an interesting book to read, if you're interested in sort of the history of Blizzard Entertainment, well, that was basically the point of this article, or at least one of the points of the article, because he puts an excerpt from his book here in the article. So it's a little bit of a hype trailer for his book, but nonetheless, there's some interesting points in here. Now, Bloomberg is paywalled, but I know this because Wowhead actually has a free breakdown basically of the article, but let's go ahead and actually penetrate the paywall here and read the original article for ourselves. All right, I'm now $2 poorer and we can read the article. So it sort of begins by painting the picture that Bobby Kotick and Mike were basically completely different beasts of the trade. That Bobby was skipping school in order to make money, go to Hampton parties, he has $1 million house. Meanwhile, Mike paints the picture of him sort of being like a nerdy type of fellow who is just worrying about the changes in StarCraft, and his house tiles were, as they say, inscribed with insignias from World of Warcraft. So they're trying to paint the picture that these are very different gentlemen. Goes on to explain that the merger made them basically the largest video game company on the planet in terms of market value at $74 billion being the future market capitalization here. But it took 6 years later is when they started to have some issues. Now, what's interesting here, and this is going to be the point we're going to talk about in just a second, is they canceled a first-person shooter called Titan, a successor to the World of Warcraft that attempted to blend a first-person shooter with the calming vibes of The Sims, and this project cost them $80 million. And reportedly, this first-person shooter, Titan, was one of the things that Bobby Kotick actually cared the most about and was part of the reason he wanted to go into the merger with Blizzard. Some of these things in this article are just funny. He's talking about how he was bragging about World of Warcraft to like Tom Brady. Now, they link back to a previous article from 2013 where Bobby Kotick agrees to buy back a large amount of the stock in accord for about $8.17 billion here in order to get full control of the company. Apparently, he was pretty upset about Titan and was applying pressure, is the terminology they're using here, to figure out what exactly happened with this project. I think this line right here really kind of dictates the core of the problem, which is that they were feeling like they were not getting enough value out of the IP, and this is what Bobby kept saying effectively. And Geo Hunt here, former executive at Blizzard, was saying even the way he'd say something like that would just make everyone at Blizzard upset, which I could understand. You're a Blizzard dev making a very beloved game like World of Warcraft, StarCraft, another guy who's outside the company who has been focusing on making money, since dropping out of school just to make money, buys out your company basically, and then starts applying pressure to extract more value out of your IP, and you can see where things would go downhill. And basically that's what this article says here. It continued to go downhill from this point on. By 2021, you could see major PR issues that we've already talked about many times, not just myself, but they've the public relation disasters. This is where you get the whole like milk meme. Then we get the acquisition from Microsoft for $69 billion. They had to pay out $54 million in the courts, and then Bobby Kotick steps down at this point. I think this quote right here is actually kind of what hits home. Blizzard's success, and they're talking about the previous success, right, at the launch of the company here, was the philosophy instilled in early days to value players above profits and to give every game as much time as it was needed. Basically, it will be ready when it's ready, is what Blizzard used to say. This is a philosophy we do see mirrored in other games. I'll give you an example. Path of Exile 2 was delayed due to the fact they just said it wasn't ready. When I flew down for one of the testings, they announced that the beta, which was supposed to be out basically the following month from the testing, was going to be delayed all the way until November 15th. We didn't even have a date at that time, but they said, it's just not ready. We're going to have to delay it. And what was interesting is while a lot of us were bummed out at the decision, everyone's like, well, if it's not ready, like that's the right call then. So this line of it'll be ready when it's ready, I've actually seen firsthand people appreciate. You can make the argument Diablo 4 took basically a year to become ready and was probably released undercooked. But that's all a side point. I just thought it was an interesting, pretty good quote from this article here. And then we have Bobby's line here. Every game has the potential to be exploited every year across every platform. So my question to you is, when you hear that, at one point do you start to feel exploited across every game and every platform? And Blizzard isn't really the only one that does this or did this or still does this or will do this in the future. It's actually kind of a lot of games. I mean, I was just playing Throne and Liberty, and while the game actually seemed like kind of fun, I mean, there's battle pass, leveling passes, microtransactions. I know it's a Korean MMO, okay? I know that's the way these goes. I played Maple Story. I'm familiar, but it's every damn game these days. Basically kept spiraling this direction of profits first. They had an argument over their chief financial officer. Bobby Kotick wanted to bring in Armin Zerza, who Blizzard was pushing back on. Basically the same philosophy of OG Blizzard was like, value first to the customers, make a good game, the profits will come, it's ready when it's ready, and then you have Bobby Kotick after the merger is kind of shoving more financial bros down the throat of Blizzard than we got to where we are. Now, I'm skipping ahead a little bit here because I'm not just going to read like every little thing and paraphrase it. I do want to point out that this right here was another interesting point where Zerza, after joining the company, the guy that Blizzard kind of didn't want to have in there, he's in there and they agreed to have him. He asks, why are you running BlizzCon? Like, this is not a very profitable type of event. And Blizzard's trying to explain to him, well, maybe it's not profitable, but it engages customer loyalty, something you can't necessarily just weigh down on a scale in terms of dollar bills. Like, this is how much people fall in love with a product. I mean, Blizzard has some of the most engaged, or had, depending upon how you look at it, some of the most engaged, loyal fan base of any gaming company. I mean, in their hype of their days, they had go-to games for every genre. You're talking RTS with StarCraft and Warcraft. Arguably the best MMO ever made, I would say it's RuneScape, but for most people, it's probably World of Warcraft. They had games across. I mean, you got the ARPG defining game of Diablo, obviously the game that this channel started from. So you have every single genre. It's just popping off. You would think that you would listen to the people that have shown the ability to dominate basically the market in every genre, but no, they're looking at the dollar bills, not the people. And the wanting to cancel the annual BlizzCon event is a perfect example. You're bringing a finance guy, he looks at it, says this doesn't make sense money-wise, but meanwhile, it's an event, again, for the people. You're costing yourself some money to get some love back from the people. Before Zerza, the company was run by Blizzard lifers and video game enthusiasts, but the CFO brought a completely different mindset. Here's another good line. Kotick wasn't going to force Blizzard to release games before they were ready, but his message was consistent. Blizzard was letting his players down by not delivering game content more often. But for Mike and his inner circle, these demands were contradictory. Kotick celebrated when Blizzard produced a new hit, but failed to grasp what it took to create one. So what happens when you're somebody who's focused on finances first, but you have a failure to understand your product? You get promoted. So Zerza got promoted to COO, and at that point they decided to expand, and they expanded into esports of all things. And this is actually something that basically the merger could agree on. This is an enthusiast point of view. Let's focus on making gaming more interesting, add some competition to it. Let's try to charge owners $250,000 to establish a team, and Kotick said, aim bigger, $20 million. And in looking bigger, he started hiring people from the NFL and the NBA instead of looking once again towards the company that started these games, Blizzard. So this article is really continually driving home one point in particular. It's that Bobby Kotick is a profit-first driven gentleman. But Mike, the original Blizzard leader here, wasn't somebody who didn't understand profits. He had been leading a video game business for a long time. He just wasn't a profit-motivated first guy. Profit-motivated, sure, it's just not the first and only thing that matters. In fact, he had even tried to resign in 2017. He had wrote a resignation letter, but they got talked out of it. And eventually this did lead to a resignation. And this quote here is kind of sad. This was by a former executive who asked not to be identified. He looked like a second-term president. He was tired, he said. He was a tired man. He decided it's time for someone else to lead Blizzard Entertainment. He was just sick of fighting the good fight. And the article ends on Blizzard would never be the same. I do think that the core of this can be understood with one decision, which is, why are we hosting BlizzCon? This isn't as profitable. And the fact that the original Blizzard team had to explain to the financial officer that you get the gains back from the goodwill and the loyalty of the people, as opposed to just the cash up front it generates really explains it all in gaming these days. This is a good example of why we end up with most games having battle passes, early access, cosmetics for sale, and subscription fees all within the same game. Bobby's now out. There's a new king on the throne with Microsoft, so the future is still to be told. But looking back on the history of Blizzard, you can kind of see what ended up happening. But the irony will always be that when you focus on the profits over the people, your product becomes poorer. But that's about it. Until next time.